Have you heard of the Golden Raspberry Award? They're also known as Razzies. These are awards given for the worst performances in a film. In honor of the Razzies and to commemorate some of the worst performances in the 2009 Ponzi scheme fallout, I have created a new award. Not the Golden Raspberry Award, the Razzies, but the Pewter Prune Award, called Prunies. And this comes from a nightmare in my childhood of having to drink prune juice if I ever had some digestive issues. Ugh. No offense to anyone who loves prune juice. So today I'd like to honor several former neighbors and friends of Stage Run, particularly the 5 to 6 homes and families who lived in the cul-de-sac around my home with a pruny. So drum roll, please. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The first pruny goes to a former neighbor who had been an early investor in Thing One's Ponzi scheme and got out with all of his money and made money. And then when the crime was revealed, he let the government know that some of Thing One's tools were his, and he was allowed to go and get many free tools courtesy of Thing One. The second pruny I'm happy to award goes to the former neighbor who was not a victim, but who verbally accosted Thing One in the presence of my daughter, causing her such trauma and distress that she promptly went into our home and threw up. The third pruny goes to the many clients who called and yelled at me for the things Thing One had done, in particular the one who called and yelled and ranted and raved about what a despicable man I had married. I'm not disagreeing with their assessments, just disagreeing with the person they honored with those assessments. The fourth pruny goes to an assortment of random strangers, people from the eastern United States, the Midwest, the West, the South, all of you caring and considerate random strangers who took the time to find me and my address and send me anonymous letters of hate or emails filled with hatred and accusations that were unfounded and untrue. The fifth pruny goes to the man who showed up at our doorstep the night of March 18th after my kids' world has just been destroyed, and we're all standing in the entryway with tears rolling down our cheeks, and he screamed and yelled and ranted and raved at me and my kids in our shock and our grief. The sixth pruny goes to a former friend and small investor. She and her husband were very wealthy medical personnel. Her husband was a surgeon and made millions. They invested for them a very small amount of $25,000 with Thing One. And then when the crime was revealed, she was calling saying, well, at least give me your kids' possessions, at least give me your son's car to compensate for my $25,000 loss. Pruny to you, my former friend. There were people that lost a lot more than you, whose lives were destroyed, and they were never able to recover. The seventh pruny goes to the former close personal friend and victim who created and distributed the weekly victim email that I mentioned previously in my series. The eighth pruny goes to the victims and former neighbors who had always said I was like a daughter to them. And even on March 18th, when they found out what had happened, and they came to me to comfort me and said, we're here for you. And then they weren't. The ninth pruny goes to the U.S. Marshal who ripped a 3-year-old off of a cheap toy and threw the toy in a pile of junk to be seized as that innocent little child stood in shock and grief and cried. For you, sir, who never gave him even a backward glance, I am honored to present a pruny to you. A 10th pruny goes to neighbors who texted the postal inspector after they saw him go into the Merriman house one day. They texted him, and he showed me the text as he stood there talking to me inside my home that said, "Hey, are you okay? We saw you go into the Merriman home 5 minutes ago and you haven't come out. What's going on in there? What is happening?" And he showed me that text in disgust and just shook his head. Pruny for you, my former friends and neighbors. The 11th pruny I'm happy to award is to the bank manager who not only took the initiative to seize an account that hadn't meant to be seized, but also who shouted loudly at me from across the lobby of the bank so that everyone in the lobby could hear. There were about 13 to 20 people there, loudly yelling that I was a criminal, that I wasn't welcome in that particular bank for my criminal activities, and told me that I was banned for life from that bank and institution. And last but not least, the most important 12th or 13th pruny goes to who else? Thing one. Who, without thing one, none of these other prunies would have been possible. Congratulations on your award.